Genesis Civil Services Academy, and welcome to today's current affair analysis. Now, one of the major important topics today is MICHAUNG makes landfall in Andhra Pradesh and it wreaks havoc. So, let's understand what UPSC syllabus it belongs to. In the general paper, GS paper 1, the geography, you need to understand the impact of the cyclones on coastal regions, its meteorological phenomena and their effects on the human lives and infrastructure. And the Indian society, it discussing the consequences of the natural disasters on the society, especially in the vulnerable areas like coastal regions. And GS paper 3, it's disaster management, highlighting the disaster management strategies, emergency response measures, and preparedness in the face of natural calamities like cyclones and environmental conservations. So, how this cyclone impacts the environmental conservation and the environmental destruction, such as coastal erosion. You need to address these issues. Let us look at how Cyclone Michaungs impacted the Andhra Pradesh coastal region. So, south side of the Andhra Pradesh has been impacted severely due to this cyclone Michaung and its nearby region. And due to the high wind speeds causing heavy rainfall and the powerful winds, it resulted in the infrastructural damage and casualties, and it disrupted the daily lives of the Andhra Pradesh citizens. How do natural disasters like cyclone affect the coastal area? So, coastal area have significant impact on the coastal regions. Due to the heavy rain and the strong winds and the storm surges, it leads to flooding and damage to the infrastructure and the loss of lives. So, especially those with inadequate housing and the weaker infrastructure, these people and these structures are highly susceptible and volatile and vulnerable to the disasters. Let us look at what measures were taken by the authorities, such as disaster management authorities, to mitigate this situation of the cyclone. These authorities beforehand initiated precautionary measures such as shutting down the power supply before the cyclone's arrival, and they also disaster management agency also worked on the providing relief and assessing the damage and ensuring the safety of every citizen there. Now, let us look at what are the relevant points uh, for the UPSC exam: cyclones and how they are formed. Second is disaster management agencies and their functions, and preparedness measures before the natural calamities, implications of the climate change on extreme weather events such as cyclone and its formation, and the difference between typhoon, cyclone, and hurricane. This can be asked in the UPSC interview also. It is a very simple question, but you need to know this. Let us dive into the cyclone and how they are formed. Okay, so this is the initial days, 0 to 2 days, warm ocean waters near the equator, typically about 26.5 degrees Celsius. It evaporates and it releases the warm, moist air. Due to this moisture laden air, it rises upwards and it creates a low pressure zone. Now, this low pressure zone is created here. Alright, due to this low pressure area, surrounding air rushes in and moves upward. So, there is a movement of air from high pressure zone to low pressure zone. Alright, now the rising warm air forms a low pressure area. It creates a low pressure area and surrounding air rushes to fill the void. Okay, now one of the most important point you all need to remember is that there is a Coriolis effect and the rotation of the earth, which is a major, one of the most important factor in formation of the cyclone. Now, what is the Coriolis effect? Earth's rotation causes the incoming air to deflect and the converging air starts rotating, forming a spinning pattern. Now, due to the rotation of the earth, this is the direction of the rotation of the earth from west to east. Alright, from in the southern hemisphere, when the air is moving from southward to northward, there is a deflection of this air movement from to the left side. Alright, and when the air is moving from northward to southward, it deflects to the rightward when we are looking from the northern side of the view. So, due to this, there is a rotation of the air. Now, this spinning and cloud formation happens, and the rotating air mass creates a cyclonic rotation, and the rising warm air condenses, leading to cloud formation. The air which has risen upwards, it condenses and it cloud and there is a formation of the cloud. In the next 8 to 10 days, it gains cyclonic characteristics with well-defined center and rotating bands of clouds. Wind speed intensifies and atmospheric pressure drops further. And the progress from tropical depression to a tropical storm. So, tropical depression is a precursor or a pre-requirement or prerequisite for the formation of the tropical storm. All right. So, in the next mature 10 to 14 days, there is a clear-cut formation of the eye wall, eye center, and the ocean surface. Eye wall and the eye center. All right. The center of the eye is calm, clear area with a lower pressure. And the eye wall is surrounding the eye contains the strongest wind and the intense rainfall. Okay, and how now the after the cyclone is matured, it moves to the coastal area. The 14 plus days, destructive winds are there, heavy rainfall is there, storm surges and causes significant damage along the coastal area as it affects. The cyclone moves across the ocean surface influenced by atmospheric conditions and wind patterns. Now it moves towards the coastal regions and the disaster, it destroys the coastal area. So in short, what we can say is in three different short images we can say is that water evaporates and it rises upwards, it forms clouds, and the air rushes inside this low pressure area, it rises upwards, and due to the Coriolis effect there is a rotational movement to this air, it rises upwards and it forms the finally the full-fledged cyclone. Okay, now the disaster management agencies and their functions. Let us look at it. Now, what are the functions? First is the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA. Okay, so it is an apex body responsible for formulating policies, plans and guidelines for disaster management at the national level. This authority formulates and designs the policies about what to do in case of disaster, what are the guidelines, what are the precautionary measures to be taken by the state and district authorities to mitigate the risks involving the disaster. Now, similar kind of role is given to the state disaster management authorities. It designs, implements the disaster management plan and policies, and it coordinates with the National Disaster Management Authority. Similar case with district disaster management authorities. It coordinates with state disaster management authorities and implements the disaster management plans and preparedness response activities in their particularly districts. National Disaster Response Force. NDRF is specialized force and this is dedicated to the rescue operations. It operates under the NDMA. This disaster response force operates under the National Disaster Management Authority and is deployed for immediate assistance during the natural or man-made disasters. State Disaster Response Force, SDRF, is similar to NDRF. Each state has its own SDRF which is responsible for responding the disaster within the state, and they all work in tandem with the NDRF and other agencies during the emergency. So there is a coordination between all these agencies when there is a disaster. We all know fire service, it plays a crucial role in disaster response, particularly during the fire related incidents and the building collapse and rescue operations. They provide support in emergencies and disasters. And Indian Meteorological Department, IMD, is forecast weather patterns, issues warnings about the potential disasters like cyclones, floods and other weather related hazards, aiding in the preparedness and timely response. So this is an IMD is an alarm system for us, and IMD is an alarm system for all the national disaster management system, all the authorities. This is the alarm system. National Remote Sensing Centers, NRSC, uses satellite data for disaster monitoring, assessment and management, providing crucial information for disaster preparedness and response. National Remote Sensing Center uses the satellite data for the monitoring. All right. So whatever is disaster, जो भी disaster इसमें हो गया है उसका monitoring जो है use through the satellite, through the use of satellite, it is done by the National Remote Sensing Center. Now ये क्या है? Central Water Commission Board and Central Groundwater Board, what is this? ये जो agencies है, they monitor water resources and they provide flood forecast and manage the water related disasters. So जो भी water related disasters है, those are monitored by the Central Water Commission and Central Groundwater Board. All right. अभी ये क्या है? National Center for Seismology. So seismology is nothing but related to earthquakes. So this particular institute is responsible for earthquakes and providing seismic information to minimize the impact of the seismic disaster. All right, so this is all about disaster management agencies and their particular functions. Okay, now let us look at the very important point, difference between the typhoon and cyclone and hurricane. Can you tell me the difference between typhoon, cyclone and hurricane? Pause the video and think about it. What can be the difference between typhoon, cyclone and hurricane? All right. Okay, so let's dive into the difference. So the basic, there is no as such basic difference between this. Only difference is that the location. This is a common geographical phenomena, and ये जो phenomena है, it is called by different names in the different oceanic regions. All right. For example, typhoon is called, for example, this cyclone or this cyclonic phenomena is called as typhoon in the location of the Northwest Pacific Ocean. So what is Northwest Pacific Ocean region? It is a Japan Sea, Yellow Sea, Philippine Sea, and this Pacific Ocean. All right. Similarly, in the Indian Ocean, this cyclonic phenomenon is called cyclone, Indian Ocean. All right. Okay, and this cyclonic phenomena is called as hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay. As clear as that, you need to remember this and revise this topic so that prelim questions may be asked through this. So this figure represents the distribution of the cyclones in the tropical regions and their probable day, the month. Okay, so let us have a sample UPSC question on related to this topic. Discuss the impact of the cyclone MICHAUNG on Andhra Pradesh coastal areas and highlight the challenges in disaster management and strategies for building resilience in vulnerable regions. When you are writing the answer, you need to start by describing the cyclone's impact on Andhra Pradesh's coastal regions. कि exactly impact हुआ क्या है? Okay, so when you go into the body of the answer, you need to go and discuss more about the challenges that are faced during the disaster management. कैसा कैसा कैजुअलिटीज़ हुआ है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चरल डैमेज कितना हुआ है, पावर आउटेजेस में कितने लोगों की जान गई है, उसका एनालिसिस और स्ट्रैटेजीज अंडरटेकन बाय द अथॉरिटी, कैसा स्ट्रैटेजी डिज़ास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी ने इम्प्लीमेंट किया है और कैसे ये डिज़ास्टर हैंडल किया है on the aftermath of the cyclone, that needs to be analyzed in this answer. So you need to conclude by suggesting the measures, और क्या इसमें इम्प्रूवमेंट किया जा सकता है इस डिज़ास्टर रेजिलियंस में. सो और क्या क्या इम्प्रूवमेंट किया जा सकता है और क्या क्या प्रिकॉशनरी मेजर्स लिए जा सकते हैं सो दैट दिस रेजिलियंस कैन बी बिल्ड अप in the vulnerable coastal areas. That needs to be, suggestions needed to be given in the conclusion of the answer. Let us look at the simple UPSC prelim MCQ. Which of the following factors primarily contributes to the vulnerability of the coastal regions during the cyclone like cyclone MICHAUNG? So सबसे ज़्यादा important और factor जो ज़्यादा destruction करता है, that is the inadequate housing and weaker infrastructure, right? So one of the most, this causes the vulnerability. Okay. So, explanation is that the coastal regions, especially those with inadequate housing and weaker infrastructure, are highly vulnerable during the cyclone due to heavy rainfall, strong winds, and storm surges that lead to flooding, infrastructural damage, and the loss of lives.